I think it's a Zoom. It's not started yet.
Snacks here while you're waiting. Contains nuts.
So does this room.
Sorry about the delay, everybody.
I like the back seat.
Yeah, we can all turn around.
I guess it was in person.
What is that creation? It's called a Parisian cookie cake. I've never made it before, so you're being experimental.
There you go. It's always good to experiment on people like, hey.
If it's all gone, you know it's good, right?
We have a link in our CCTV group or for the Zoom. There we go.
I thought
What did you get? Did you get an email? I just showed up on the website. For the first time. Well, what a call, thank you. Can I get an email to forward it? Yeah.
I'm just emailing it right
Oh,
Okay, great.
easier said than done.
Just a couple of, an old house over here and then, we moved into the last November. So, here, a few months now.
You can see some there. That's a good idea, that would know that I got through, okay? So, Dean. And that's N is a Nancy. All right, let's see if that went through, so there's,
Did that make it?
There we go.
Aaron.
Yeah.
What's your name?
No.
Evans or Aaron?
Aaron.
ERIN.
The oldest brick place in
I
Maine. Yeah, so anyway, this is the guy that built that. Yeah, we basically just.
Wendy's always the same Zoom link.
It is always the same Zoom link, I guess. I just learned that.
So that's Andy. Right.
I don't know. Okay,
What the heck?
the real question is, can somebody on Zoom confirm that they can actually hear me talk? Can you see people?
Yep, that's great.
I can hear you.
Oh, thanks, Karen.
Okay, great. And, Lindy, can you enable multiple people to the screen sharing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let me do this. Hi, Karen.
With the Zoom phone, okay.
This is the beauty of the learning a remote tool. We still get to hang out with Karen.
Yeah, good. Oh. Good, yeah, if it doesn't, no.
I tried to share, well,
Don't.
I think if you just click stop share,
I'm the membership person.
Uh-huh.
then maybe I can share.
Great.
Oh.
Okay, sounds good, Jack.
Stop share.
Now, I'm gonna share this guy.
So that's so there's been a hole in the floor in there.
Alright. Thank you
Karen, can you
guys.
Prevention and management.
You can see her presentation,
Oh.
Karen?
Yes,
Great.
but I see the speaker view also.
Oh, okay. Let's see if I can make that not be the case.
Overhang and.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And the drip catch.
Crash course.
Okay.
Glad to have empty. I mean, it's
Karen, are you still seeing like the wacky post thing?
Now I'm seeing the sidebar on the left along with your main screen.
See if I can get it.
With my work stuff. I'm tired of work, whatever I was working on. My professional.
Interview.
You know, Janet, when you do Zoom,
That'll keep you busy.
if I mute everybody,
Let me see if I get out of Zoom.
like, would I mute all of them, or do I have to go to each one?
I apologize, everybody, for the delay.
I was just shy to go. Walk there, up here to the top.
You know, it's like, I'll just.
Didn't do any of that. So I was comfortable. Yes. I was.
Boy, this is just one calamity after another.
It's the yeah. The hip roof? Yeah. And that was like.
Does anybody know right off the top of their head how to get that to go away?
So, and they stay in it all, which is good.
There we go. No, you're still seeing through that interview, even though I'm seeing normal. We're just gonna live with the fact that you're gonna see the next slide. It's gonna be like me giving you a preview of your, is that gonna drive you nuts?
Oh, I see.
I think most of us are just gonna be listening to you anyway.
Alright, let's see, now I still need to get into this Zoom to share. Let's see if I can do that.
You do a pretty good visual yourself.
Oh, I can be funny, all right. Sometimes I'm the funniest person I've ever met. That doesn't work. I'm assuming that the people on Zoom aren't able to see the screen, I don't think, from the owl.
We can see the screen.
You can, Andy?
Yes.
From the owl?
No.
No, we are sharing your screen. It's working well enough. We do see on the left, yeah, we see the same thing. We're in good shape.
They're seeing the presentation, because the presentation is showing up on this laptop as well.
But it's not.
If you look at gallery view, you can see the owl perspective.
Oh, yes. I think she was wondering if we could see. But Erin, you're in good shape for the Zoom. We can see your slides. Oops, stop a minute.
You got the HDMI into the, yep.
Yeah. Is that what it should be? That's what should be putting in. Okay, see what I'm saying?
I thought that he said.
I think this is my power cord. This is the channel to the.
Screen right here. It's almost like.
Oh, there we go. If I just drag it over.
There's still another one.
That's the Zoom screen. Now let's see if I share. I might need you to help me. If I share. There we go. I'm gonna share screen too.
It's working.
Okay. Sorry that you're getting the presenter view, but my technical skills are low and my time is short. We've already wasted 10 minutes fighting with the PowerPoint. So I'm just gonna move right on. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I apologize, I don't need to yell. I have a tendency to be very yelly when I'm talking to groups of people.
Right. I have one question. Why is every B missing from your presentation, the letter B?
It's the last B.
Yeah, the last B.
Oh,
Has us.
which I thought was very cute. Right? So anyway, After, with that cheery note, here, it's driving me crazy that it's so small. I guess we're just, yeah. I also can't drive from there. Hold on. I apologize, I'm not, it's my, can I get my mouse over there? There it is. Ooh, this is hurting me. This is hurting me a lot.
You want me to be your mouse person?
All right. I think I'm just gonna do up and down. Let me just see if I can at least make this full screen. Does that look like a full screen button? And that's it. The fifth is slide to the front window.
Oh, there we go. I gotta put everybody to sleep. Just trying to take some of the glare off on the screen.
Okay. At least we can get a little bit more. Okay, sorry about this, guys. So I'm starting with pictures of my beekeeping operation because that's the way that I always start, conversations about beekeeping. I feel like whenever I hear other people talking about bees, I like to see what their situation looks like, to see whether or not it seems like it resonates with me. You know, if I see pictures of big warehouses and forklifts, I know that probably the scale of the operation is a little bit bigger than mine. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Erin Evans. I'm an EAS certified master beekeeper. I live in Portland. I run somewhere between 25 and 100 colonies at any given time. I keep trying to get down towards 25 and I keep creeping up in the larger numbers because it's just hard for me to scale that. But I'm here talking today briefly about swarming and swarm management because it's really timely. I'm also supposed to be teaching a 2-night class starting next week, Wednesday and the following Wednesday at Cumberland Cooperative Extension on one on swarm management and one on artificial swarming. And they're currently under enrolled. Frankly, I'm really hesitating. I was even hesitating to mention it to you guys because if they don't happen, that will add 2 nights back into my life at a really busy time. And I'd love to see those. But if you're feeling like, you know, this is really helping your life and you want to attend those, feel free to register and they may or may not get canceled depending on whether or not enough people sign up. So again, just some pictures of beekeeping and me and my operation. My focus, I'm a sideline beekeeper in my straight job. I'm the director of finance and HR at Maine Audubon, which is actually a full-time job. I also just accidentally started a business with my sister in Portland. We opened a Zumba studio, which, you know, seeing as that I'm the controller / director of finance at a lot of small businesses, I was like, oh, that's not gonna take much time. Yeah, that was a mistake. So anyway, I'm a very busy person and my beekeeping is a sideline to the rest of my life. I also have a little tiny farm because once you get bees, then you accidentally get chickens. And then once you have chickens, then you accidentally get a couple of goats because the bees are making the multiflora roses bloom and they're making more rose tips. And then the invasive species come and then you can't do anything. And so then you have to fix that. And then the next thing you know, there's a hole in the bucket. And so anyway, that's the long way of saying I do a lot of thinking about how to efficiently handle my beekeeping operation. And so a lot of what I do has a lot to do with like, do it once and then don't have to do it again, don't revisit a million times. And that's part of that impetus. This is my equipment shed. I like to explain that one of the things that I acknowledge when I'm talking to beginner or sideline beekeepers is that it's a lot easier to manage your operation in the optimal way when you have infinite amounts of equipment. Like when your equipment is limited, your choices get limited. I fortunately am not limited in my equipment side. And so I just acknowledge that if you're working in a growing operation, if you've got 3 hives and you don't have any drawn comb, that can be a hindrance in your swarm management techniques. But all that being said, that's just my way of saying that, you know, there's a lot of different ways to manage your bees. There's a lot of different ways to manage swarming. That doesn't mean that some of them won't be wrong, but, that's part of the kind of the promise of becoming a master beekeeper, an EAS certified master beekeeper, that you won't just kind of put bad information out there on the internet or in other places. And so the things that I'm talking with you about are things that are practical for people in Maine. This is something that I like to say. I often, when I teach beginner bee school, I get the job of I hype everybody up and get them all excited, and then I come in with the reality of what this is really gonna be like. And one of the things that I really like to put right up there up front is people are like, I just only want 2 beehives, right? That's the goal. I want 2, I'm gonna buy 2, I want 2. And the reality is that's really realistic when you buy 2 chickens or 2 puppies. But it's actually a completely unrealistic plan to have when you have 2 bee colonies. You will always have a fluctuation in your colony numbers because they are actively reproductive, and you either house that reproductive instinct by way of catching or preventing swarming or making splits or the other variety of ways that you facilitate the colony level increase, or you just live in denial, in which case you are just pretending that something isn't happening when it actually is. And so honeybee colonies are managed, not domesticated, and we really have to plan to have that change in colony numbers. We have to plan for the swarming, and that's a great thing. I mean, there's, as we all know, there's massive demand for healthy bee colonies. And so if we just right up front start talking about, okay, I'm gonna try to do I'm gonna prevent swarming by either catching swarms or through swarm traps, or managing my swarming through artificial swarming, or just catching the swarm themselves in the yard, put them into something, and then that doesn't mean you have to keep it. You can sell them, you can trade them, you can give them away. But this is just a fact of beekeeping, is that we're gonna have to manage the reproductive swarming instinct. So here we are with a cute little baby swarm and a couple of innocent beekeepers, you know, with big dreams and wide eyes. But the very basics about the swarming, which I'm gonna run through super fast. How many of you guys have never had a swarm? Okay. How many of you are brand new beekeepers? Okay, awesome. How many of you have caught lots of bee swarms? Okay, so we're half and half, and some people in the middle. Okay, so I'm gonna go through the very basic, because it's important to kind of really think about this. But the old queen is leaving with the swarm with somewhere in the vicinity of 30% of the flying bees, sometimes more. And they're leaving new baby queen cells in the hive, in the parent colony, not the one that the swarm came out of. And so the old queen leaves with the swarm. These are some very kind of fundamental basics. And I mentioned the fact that these swarm queens are reared in a queen-right situation as a kind of nod to the more advanced beekeepers who understand that what I'm describing is not the way that the majority of commercially raised queens are raised. We'll just put it that way. And so the swarming instinct really starts with the beginning of egg laying and the colony growth in the spring. It's essentially their second instinct, natural instinct after surviving winter. Aside from not dying, the next thing the bees turn to is collecting enough food so they can do reproductive swarming. And beekeepers have a tendency to be very kind of knee-jerk about, we go right from being absolutely panicked that our bee's gonna die in, right this time of year when we're walking out, listening to our hives, looking at the bee poop in the snow. We're all doom and gloom, they're all gonna die, and the next thing we're all worried about is they're all gonna swarm. And it seems to be, we're kind of it's always feast or famine. Sorry, I lost my mouse again, so now I have to figure out how to, there we go. So here. Oh, okay, let's see if I can not screw it up. Okay. So the really basics continued after the swarm has left the parent colony. The new baby queens, often dozens or more of varying ages, are still in the colony. And hopefully one of the queens that is left in the colony returns, often kills a bunch of other queen cells, like that second round of queen cells, and then returns and mates, and then the colony becomes queen right again. So we've kind of got two super organisms we're talking. The one that left with the old queen that's now bivouacking out looking for a new home, and then the new colony. So when we're looking at swarms in our own apiaries, we have two people to worry about, two different superorganism colonies. All right. So just kind of a picture of what swarming looks like often at the hive. You see a lot of extra flying around, and then the bivouacking colony in the tree. And so there are other types of swarms other than reproductive swarms. Overcrowding swarms particularly is the kind of overarching group of what I call other non-reproductive swarms. But what we're talking about is the reproductive swarms, which are split by beekeepers into two groups: the primary swarm, which has the mated queen, and the potential small after swarms, which may or may not, which there may be several of, depending on the colony's oversizedness at the swarm. So the bee's goal is colony level reproduction, and the process takes several weeks, approximately 20 to 30 days, start to finish. But beekeepers have a tendency to look only at the little window that has the flying part to talk about the swarming. And what you really need to kind of think about is the start to finish process, and that helps get ahead of it pretty heavily. So the beekeeper is attempting to either promote, delay, or prevent swarming, usually delay or prevent. But just what the things that beekeepers do that promote swarming is leaving the colony alone in a same size cavity, because that is how they manage their congestion. They basically build themselves up to feel congested. And then also adding only foundation to the colony is something that beekeepers often do. You'll see this on the Cumberland County email group 2 or 3 times this year. Somebody will hop on there and say, my stupid bees swarmed. I don't understand this. They're not responding to the things that I do. I just added a super foundation 3 days ago. Right? How many times have we seen that? Like 1 million. And the problem is that the swarm that issued from the hive today has been working on this process for 20 days. And we just did an ineffective management technique 3 days before they were already working on it. Because for the last 17 days, they've been raising these new baby queens and getting ready to swarm. And simply adding a box of foundation has done nothing but create a little bit of kind of empty space at the top of the colony. And empty space is a really important, I have a slide of this, yes. So to a big congested colony that looks like this, foundation, I think of foundation as outer space. Like it's literally nothingness, right? You can't put food here, you can't raise babies here. It's a little bit of outer space, but it's not actually what I consider to be real space. Space is a space that you can lay eggs, that you can store food. And so the move of adding a box of foundation is a plan. It's the leading towards creating space. Like if you add a box of foundation and the bees have time to secrete the wax to build the cells, they will turn nothingness into space, right? But just adding a frame of foundation itself isn't creating usable space immediately for the bees in the way that adding a box of drawn comb is. Which is my long way of saying, this is the one good upside of losing a few colonies in the winter, is that you now have drawn comb, which is a wildly valuable resource in colony management. And so, you know, kind of at the apiary level, when you have 15 colonies and you lose 2 in the winter, it's a bummer, but you think to yourself, bummer, I lost 2, but now at least I have some resources that I can work with next spring that are drawn. And so that's kind of that's the reality of kind of learning to manage your whole apiary. So in terms of swarming, what we're talking about wanting to delay or prevent, delaying swarming tactics are to add empty or nearly empty drawn comb, preferably right around the brood nest. Add more boxes to the hive to allow the queen to lay in a new area. These are kind of 2 different strategies that are similar, but not exactly the same. And adding more space for the house bees to move nectar out of the brood area. So basically adding drawn comb supers. Preventing swarming, well, let me go back to delaying swarming. I just want to illustrate that for a minute. So what I mean by empty or nearly empty drawn comb around the brood nest, let's imagine that you have a 2 deep beehive setup. Are most of you running deeps or medium? Who's in deeps? And who's in medium? Both. Okay, we're just gonna pretend 2 deeps and other people can translate their thoughts. But so let's imagine that it's prime swarming season, which is on or about the middle of May. And so we're starting to think about, if the swarm is gonna issue in the middle of May, we need to be looking at doing these management techniques towards the beginning of May. So like 1st of May, that weekend or so, or thereabout. And so when you start seeing that your colony is getting congested, there's a lot of food, maybe they went through winter with a fair amount of honey, which they often do. A great strategy is to take some of those big honey frames away, like literally remove them from the colony and replace them with drawn comb, and put that drawn comb right up against the edge of the brood nest. So while the bees themselves are kind of congesting where the queen can lay eggs, you are adding a space for her to lay. Do we follow me with that? So just literally take a couple frames out, move the rest to the side, and then put that drawn comb space right at the edge of the brood nest. That's a strategy. Another strategy that I absolutely adore is when I have a 2 deep colony that's full of bees, getting, looking like they're healthy and getting ready to swarm, and I've got that barn full of drawn comb, I'll take an entire additional deep box of drawn comb. I will take my lid off, split my colony into 2 boxes, take one whole box off to the side, put the other box, leaving the other one where it is. Take 1 frame of open brood from the bottom box, replace it with a frame of foundation up against the side, a frame of drawn comb up against the side wall from my new box of comb. Put an entirely, I forgot the whole step. I'm bringing a whole new box of MC drawn comb, right? So again, the big deep box full of bees. And I've got this new box of drawn comb. I'm gonna take a frame of brood out of the bottom box. I'm gonna replace that frame of brood with an empty drawn comb down into the bottom box, preferably not breaking up the brood nest. I'll stick it up the side. And then I'm gonna put that whole box of drawn comb right there in the center and put that 1 frame of brood right in the middle. And then I put the other box on top. And so what I just did is I went from having a colony that's like a big oval inside a rectangle box, to now I have a colony that looks like an hourglass inside a rectangle box. And that's the really important thing, is the hourglass. Because I don't want to split the brood nest and leave 9.5 inches of space in between it. But by making that connector, the nurse bees are going to cover all of those frames And now I have put 9 additional frames of drawn space right here that the queen can lay in beautifully, and it just really entices the bees to clean that, because it's in their brood nest. It's basically impossible for them to ignore that. So it's way more effective than throwing that box right up on the top, is not really as enticing. And breaking the brood nest without the connector also splits the colony, which we're not trying to do. What we're trying to do is expand it. This is a fantastic way of managing a colony, particularly if your goal is to do artificial swarming, or to come back and the colony is so congested that you're never gonna find the queen. You're like, this isn't even worth my time looking. If you do this move that I just described, 2 days later, I guarantee the queen will be laying in that middle box somewhere, because it's the massive amount of available space. Are we following me? So that's a fantastic delay swarming tactic, if you have the equipment to do it. And it's just elegant, it works every time. And then the really nice thing to do is just let them lay it up all crazy, and then split this colony. You can just take the box that has the queen in it, and now you have the 2 as the parent and the 1 is the new colony, and boom, you just made a nice clean split. We also, built the colony up extra strong in the process of giving them the time to work in that 3rd box. It's great. That's also a really nice way of managing kind of artificial swarming / early splitting when the weather kind of sucks and is intermittent, because they've got a lot of brood nest space to work through, I guess is the best way to describe that kind of cleaning and organizing. When maybe they aren't otherwise working in the supers, like if it's raining a lot of days and so they're just getting little windows of food, this is a great strategy. Okay, so preventing the swarming tactics. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to midwife the swarm, and actually manipulate the colony in such a way that they can't swarm, or midwife the swarm. And so what I mean by that is there's 3 components to a swarming colony. And if you take any one of these 3 components away from the other 2, they can't swarm. Like, all 3 have to be there in order for the swarm to issue, right up until like the very last second. And I cannot, who else lives in Portland? Anybody here? There you go. Where do you live, Janet? I didn't realize you were in Portland.
Well, actually not Kate.
Close enough. Those of us who live in the high rent district, where if you throw a swarm out in your neighborhood, the probability of it becoming a big, big, big problem very fast, are very swarm sensitive. Like, I will do almost anything to actually prevent a swarm from issue. I mean, I have a big piece of property, but they're still, if they leave my property, gonna be in a little neighborhood. And the headline in the Portland Press Herald is not gonna be beekeeper on 7.5 acres threw a swarm out into her jerk neighbor lawyer's yard. It's gonna be, Portland, Rosemont area terrorized by, beekeepers and Zumba ladies. But, so I'm quite sensitive about it. And so when you get to a colony, I mean, sometimes you actually see swarms issue and return to a colony. They weren't quite ready, and it's happening, and you have to absolutely make a move to stop that, because some of us all have to go to work tomorrow. You can be more or less aggressive with separating these 3 groups of people. And so, like, if in fact that was the case, if somebody called me, or if I had in my home yard a situation where somebody said, I saw a swarm issue from my colony today and return to it, what do I do now? It's 7:30 at night. What I would say is go out there and pick up that beehive and switch locations between that beehive and another colony. And so tomorrow morning, what's gonna happen, right? Are we all following me? some of us are not following me, you're not following me, you're a new beekeeper. Okay, so here's what happens. Bee colonies, the individual field bees do not check to make sure that their beehive has not moved every time they leave it. Because to them, that's a ridiculous idea that the beehive would move. And so what you can do is if I'm a beehive over here and I have another beehive in my yard over here, I can switch the location of those two colonies. And the next morning, everybody who used to live over there is gonna fly out to the clock in the neighborhood and they're gonna go right back to over there. And now, this colony has the queen and the brood and house bees, but the field force that came back is the dinky little field force from that other colony that I just switched them with. And so if you switch a strong about the swarm colony with a weaker colony, all of a sudden they've lost their giant field force that was planning to go with the issuing swarm, right? And now you've got a little bit of time box. You don't wanna do that move to take like, maybe like, let's say like a little tiny weak nuke, like a colony that just barely survived the winter that you broke down into a nuke. You don't wanna switch them with these guys without a little more thought to that. Like you might actually wanna take an extra frame of like nurse bees to help support that. But you can basically in many elegant ways figure out to do just that switch. And if you had to, if it was like, I have between now and tomorrow morning to solve this problem, and then I have to go to a work conference for 3 days, I would say switch them with the nuke, put the nuke over here, it's gonna get the field force, and just put a bunch more space and a good amount of food, if you could. Like, so take your nuke and put it into an 8-frame or a 10-frame box. And just Hail Mary it, because it's safer for both than the swarm issuing and being hanging out in your yard while you're at a county conference for 3 days. Do we follow me on that? Okay, so that's a relatively inelegant solution. A very high labor solution would be to remove all the frames of brood and shake the bees off, or most of the bees, and put them somewhere else. But you could do it. I mean, you could say, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna split this. I can't find my queen, or I don't want to, or I just really need a bunch of brood for a bunch of splits I'm planning to make, and you could just take all the brood, basically all the brood out. You're gonna take the queen cells with it when you take the brood, and then you have the queen and the field force are stuck back in the original location, and she'll just start laying again. But they will not swarm. I mean, they can't. They're not gonna go and create an actual swarm, even if they did it earlier today as a trial run, if there's no brood left. They're gonna launch back into trying to get prepared to be reproductive, but you've basically eliminated that. So those are the two inelegant solutions. And then the most elegant solution to preventing the swarm is to actually find and move the queen, which is what artificial swarming is all about. And that's what we were gonna talk about for a whole night, maybe in 2 weeks or not. But you can read about it on the internet. And this is not something I invented. This is a very common, when I learned the term artificial swarming, it was in the Beecraft magazine, which is the magazine of the British Beekeepers Association. But this is a very common kind of English garden style management technique. I wouldn't say it's straight up kind of European, because the Germans are much more than that, but the British have a really kind of elegant way, and this is one of the big ways of that they manage swarm. So thinking about how it goes in the colony. So when they're doing swarm preparations, the earliest thing is the queen starts laying, which is gonna be soon, shockingly, maybe even laying a little bit now, but when the queen starts really laying a lot, which will be beginning of next month, then when you start seeing drones being raised in your colony, now we're getting much closer to actual swarming. Population increases in the colony and the queen pheromone is diluted by the number of bees. It's not that she's losing the amount of pheromone that she puts out, it's that the number of bees that are sharing the finite resources of her pheromone is getting to be more bees to less pheromone. And then available laying space becomes sparse because a lot of cells are already full of baby bees in various stages, and the other cells are full of food because it's spring and we're hoarding and loading in it. So to try to prevent the swarming without increasing, we're gonna make sure the colony has lots of space for nectar and pollen the way that I just did. We can insert frames of brood and drawn comb around the brood nest. You can try the DeMarie method, which is a lot of switching things around. It's very labor intensive, but it's fun for trying. It's essentially making splits without actually making splits. It's making splits on their own stack of hive, which frankly, I find to be more work than just having another bottom board and making real splits. But it's really important to realize that 90+% of all colonies will attempt reproductive swarming every year. And the 10% that don't are simply too sick to do it. Like, we just need to accept that every colony is going to want to swarm, and so let's work with them on this like really fun, super great project. So basically separating these three components by taking the queen and a frame or two of brood and sticking it into a nuke right at the beginning of swarming season is the most elegant way of managing the increase. So you take the old queen and start a new colony, and the old colony goes through the process of requeening themselves with the baby queens that are in it. And at its fundamental level, you can just do that quick little artificial swarm and leave it. You risk a little bit of after swarming if you don't reduce the number of queen cells down. But if you add enough space, you often don't see that after swarm. And then if you actually are prepared to catch the after swarm, you could do that also. So, like, yeah. Sorry, here we go. Okay. There, now this. Okay. Swarms generally occur in Maine between 10 and 2, like the warm part of the day. They also generally move from the bivouac during those same times. They usually cluster near their parent colony, 25 feet or so from the parent colony, and then they typically want to move away for their permanent location about a quarter of a mile. These are kinds of rules of thumb. The 25 feet from the parent colony is often baffling when you find a swarm of bees somewhere really random, like on the wall of the porches at the mall. Like, where was that parent colony? Probably on the roof in some kind of HVAC, but who knows? But there's not a lot of stuff 25 feet from the wall of the porches, but nonetheless. And there was even a swarm of bees also at that now defunct Mexican place out there. So there's definitely somebody living somewhere at the mall.
And there was one down on the waterfront in the bus stop a couple years ago.
Yeah.
That, those glass bus
Oh,
stops.
yeah. Yeah, so you're like, where are these guys? Probably on the top of a nearby building, but it's hard to tell. So now we're talking about the actual swarm, not the parent colony and the shepherding. So the bees and the mated queen, probably because of we're talking about the prime swarm, cluster together. They allow the temperature of the vast majority of the bees to drop down. And then the scout bees search for new hive locations. They return to the cluster and dance for the location of their choice, and they go together to the new spot. And this little description here that I have in 4 bullets is essentially the distillation of Tom Seeley's life work, discovering and really understanding all of these processes. And so if you have interest in listening to a fantastic book on tape, you can listen to Tom Seeley's books, Wisdom of the Hive, and Honeybee Democracy is all about this choosing, and Wisdom of the Hive is about the process. But he, with the help of infrared cameras and other digital technology, along with adorable French interns from Canada, and other places, Cornell, has really demystified this, and we know more about the swarming process than human beings have ever known before we had cameras and things that we could actually figure out. So this process is super cool, but just kind of knowing those basics allows us to kind of manipulate the situation to hopefully make it easier for us and the bees. This is a picture of a colony that I removed from a shed on Cushing's Island, actually. The beekeeper was on Cushing's, and then the bees moved into this shed this is a Labor Day swarm, which typically old-fashioned beekeepers would have called a suicide swarm. And this was us removing them on a warm day in late April. And so they pulled it together pretty decent for late in the year. All right, so why catch the swarms? The real reason that I believe in swarm catching is this one, is that less than 5% of swarms will survive to see their second winter. And that has a lot to do with varroa mite treatment. The fact that they won't, that swarms on their own aren't going to have the assistance of humans to fight this parasite that we basically brought them. And that's a problem. And then, I mean, it's a difficult enough situation, kind of restarting a home from scratch. Swarms are really valuable in the beekeepers' apiary, like in your apiary management technique. It's a great colony, sorry, I don't mind nice spelling, but swarms will build comb faster than any other starter colony. They're fun. It adds a little excitement to your life, and also it prevents neighbor relation problems to actually catch the swarm and get rid of them. I should also put in here, it's great PR for other human beings. People are fascinated by watching beekeepers catch swarms. It's one of the ways, like, people like buying honey from us, but actually, actually seeing humans interact with this very dynamic super organism can be an eye-opener and convert the people who otherwise were, really committed to their lawn pesticides and their beekeeping ordinances or whatever negativity they have. They actually see this process, and we can convert them pretty often. And also because bees end up, when the swarm is out in the bivouac, they often make really bad decisions about new places to live. Including this location, which was in one of those John Calvin Stevens houses on Sawyer Road, right at the edge of South Portland and Cape Elizabeth, where Maxwell's used to have there used to be a strawberry field back there. But there's a lot of American foul brood in the walls there, and this colony moved into a place that wasn't safe. So there's a very complicated looking swarm in a tree in my yard, and so yeah. So again, back to the beginning of how the swarm is going to happen. The steps to swarming, what the bees do: start rearing lots of drones, increase congestion in the brood nest, raise the new baby queens. They call this, in the old timey books, they call it running the queen around to lose weight and prepare for flight. But what that actually means is basically increase congestion in the brood nest so much that it's difficult for the queen to lay, and she loses weight because she's not able to lay as many eggs a day as she normally was. And then the swarm issues, that's what happens on the colony level. What that kind of looks like: congestion in the brood nest. She's only got this little tiny patch of space that she can lay in. You see that that's the queen with the mark, and they've packed food all around in the brood nest. So again, adding that space. will alleviate that issue. It stops her from losing the weight because she can continue to lay the eggs, so it slows the whole process down. It also gives the whole colony a whole lot more nurse bees to continue to feed, slowing things down. So there's a little bit of, old timey talk about how queens reared under reproductive swarming conditions are inferior and that you're breeding for swarming, which is a bunch of hooey. That's beekeeper talking to beekeeper talk, but absolutely these queens are raised in the ideal conditions, because the reality is the ideal condition for the best raised queens is prime nutrition. And the nutrition comes from the food that the nurse bees are eating, like good quality nectar and pollen and glandular secretions in their head, which they make when the colony is safe and happy and building. And so there's nothing about the fact that the colonies are doing reproductive swarming that's actually breeding swarmy queens. Just not the case. So queen cells, swarm cells often look like this, down tucked into the edges of our colonies. I'm gonna kind of speed up through here. That's another typical queen cell in a swarmy looking position. Again, this is swarm cells built off of plastic foundation. Sometimes the bees don't love to use plastic foundation and they'll edge off it, but those are some great looking swarm cells. These bees make jokes. So then back to after the hive swarms, then this is, when the beekeeper can help. One of the things that people will do when they see their hive is swarmed, and they go back and they look at their parent colony, they may or may not see this kind of a cell, which is a supersedure cell. We know that this is a supersedure cell because of the fact that the queen cell is within taproot and they're all about the same age. And so sometimes people will panic when they see supersedure cells and go through and cut them. And then they realize like, oh, wait a minute, there aren't any more eggs in this colony. And so it's just an important difference to understand the difference between what that queen cell looks like and those guys. These guys are tucked in edges, they're hanging down in normal places, they're not built off the front of a frame. You see they like picked an egg to make into this queen cell. We're following me a little bit on that. Also, I'll just leave it there. Well, the other big difference is there's only one. When there is only one, that's very uncommon with the swarm cells. Even this one, you can see there's another queen cell back here on the other side. Like when they're making swarm cells, there's almost never one. So that's a good way. If you look at a queen cell and you think, oh my God, I saw a queen cell, then the next step is like, are there more? So, okay. So at the parent colony, assuming that you went in and you saw all those queen cells like we saw on that frame, you reduce the number of queen cells down to 1, which is destroying queen cells. I'm gonna say that very honestly. If the queen cells have already hatched, like sometimes you open your hive and the queen cells have just hatched, you can see that. At that point, just close it up and be careful, because the new baby queens are easily startled. They are literally infants. They act funny and they sometimes they fly off. So now once you check the parent colony and reduce the number of queen cells down to 1 or 2, just leave them alone for basically 3 weeks. I think I'm pointing at a baby queen here. Can you see her thorax? Can you see the little baby queen? The problem with virgins is they're not laying yet. Mated queens have behaviors that are all focused around continuing to lay, right? And the new baby queens are doing other things. They're reducing the number of their rivals. they're preparing to fly, and so they're just not as predictable. You can basically find them anywhere. All right, so after the swarm has issued, we're assuming that they issue on the day that the queen cells are hatching, and that's a little bit of a variable. It can be 2 or 3 days, but typically some days the queen cells have literally hatched, and the bees are holding the baby queens into the cells. Like Tom Seeley has lots of great video of that, where they've intentionally created situations where the queen cells hatch to see what happens. And you can watch videos of it, it's fascinating. But so anyway, the baby queens hatch, the swarm issued. So in an ideal world, 4 or 5 days after they hatch, they've physically matured enough that they can fly, right? So they walk around for a few days until they can fly. More could harch at this time. Sorry about my typing. Day 10, new queen finishes mating. So assuming that on day 5 she starts mating, she comes back after 5 days or so, 3 to 5 days. She mates in the air with between 15 and hopefully 40 drones, bringing a lot of new genetic diversity back into the colony in her spermatheca. And then 5 or 10 days, or 3 to 5 days later, she starts laying. And so on day 20, assuming that on day 15, she just began laying eggs, 5 days later, those eggs are 2-day-old larvae, which are teeny tiny things that are very hard to see. And on 5 days later, those earliest eggs are now capped brood, which is going to be like a teeny tiny little patch of capped brood amongst a larger welling swell of open larvae, right? And we're laying out into a circle and will be eggs on the outside. But so that's about as soon as you can anticipate seeing brood. And again, this brood isn't going to be a whole box of brood. This is probably going to be brood on 2 sides of a frame, maybe 4 sides, maybe 2 whole sides and a little patch on the next one. And so it's important, lots and lots and lots of beekeepers get to about this point, day 15, new queen is just laying, they don't see eggs, they don't recognize those signs, they go to Phil Gavin, they spend $58 on a brand new queen who they put into the colony, and they immediately kill her because they already had a queen in here. Worse yet, they put this queen in here in the mating flights. The bees kill her, and then the queen gets eaten by a bird, never comes back, and now we have to spend another $58 for another queen. Happens all the time, right? Every experienced beekeeper who's done this. Plenty of you, don't be denied. And so it's really best to wait until day 25. And the most important thing, I know that it sounds when beekeepers, particularly when you take your class from Bill Gavin or Chris Rogers, and you want 1 beehive, right? How many people know this person? I only want 1 beehive. I'm gonna get a beehive. And we beekeepers say, you really need 2 beehives. And they're like, I don't want 2 beehives, I only want 1 beehive. I strictly don't want 2 beehives. If Aaron says that 2 turn into 4 or 7, because then I don't want 14. But the reality is, when this happens, and you're here day 10 to 20 and freaking out about whether or not your parent colony has, a queen, one thing that you can absolutely never go wrong with is just go into another colony, get a frame that has eggs on it. Doesn't matter how many eggs. Could be 2 eggs, could be 2,000 eggs, could be a big frame of capped brood with a few eggs, could be a big frame of brood with a little bit of capped brood. Any eggs, shake the bees off, preferably, hopefully you checked for your queen in that colony, and take that frame of brood and put it into the colony that swarmed. If they are queenless, they will immediately start trying to rear a new baby queen here, and you'll see it. And if they're not queenless, you're gonna come back and they're just gonna have raised this brood, and there isn't gonna be a queen cell on it. And sometimes you do this, you you're like, I think they're queenless, but I don't know. So I'm gonna throw a frame of eggs in there. You throw a frame of eggs in there and you come back a week later, because, you know, everybody does their beekeeping on the weekends. All the open brood is now capped. They didn't raise a queen cell, and yet still no eggs in this colony. Like your queen still isn't mated. But because she was there, because she was walking around in some phase of this variable development, they didn't raise a queen cell. So what do? You go get another frame of brood and you put it in to see if they do it again. And often, you know, maybe the queen actually didn't make it back. Maybe when you put this one in, they thought that she was gonna be fine, and it turned out that she gets eaten by a swallow at the last day of mating flights. And now in the second frame of brood, they raise a queen cell, which is fine. And at that stage, destroy the queen cell and buy a mated queen, because we don't wanna wait another 25 days until she starts laying, unless in fact that's what you want, but that way you're not wasting money on queens. And you're also learning how, you know, it's incredibly variable how long this stage from hatching to seeing eggs, you'll be surprised until you start really rearing queens, how much variety, how much variation you see in that. So that's kind of the short version, and I'm out of time, but I have 40 more slides left. So I'm gonna zip through to my next topic, which we're just cute baby queens. Sometimes you see baby queens outside your hives after when the birds are coming back, and big beautiful marked queens. That's what we're looking for. High-end queens. So when you find your eggs and brood, then you can mark your queens, add supers, and just move on. Yeah, baby queen outside the hive, more baby queens. Sometimes if you see random bees on the ground, look at what's happening. Like, bees don't do random things on the ground. And so when you see random bees on the ground, like this was a queen who was a virgin who basically flew up, kind of fell out of the colony before she was really able to get it up to fly. And these are attendants trying to encourage her to kind of move back up to the colony. Baby virgins definitely have a tricky life. It's not easy being a baby queen. All right, here we go, back to moving the mouse. Okay. Yeah, okay, quickly. So you can watch me catch swarms on the YouTubes. Aaron Forbes catching a swarm with the YouTube. Like catching swarms is fun. I mean, for beekeepers, this is really exciting. It's like, you know, it's like picking out puppies. I do have to say it's really important if you are housing, if you're catching bee swarms, particularly when you don't know where they came from, but even particularly when you do know where they came from, if you live in any kind of an urbanized area, it's really important to realize that when colonies are scouting for a new home, they could find a colony that died from American foul brood, steal its honey, and have that bacterial infected honey in their guts, which would then spread an AFB infection. Are we basically following me on that? And the important thing is, if you put them on, if you install bees who just ate American foul brood in a dead colony, now there's AFB infected honey in their guts. If you install them on drawn comb, which is not nothingness, they will regurgitate that infected honey into cells and store it, because that's what they do. They store it. And then if the queen lays eggs, the bacterial infection happens in the first 5 days of the egg laying. While the eggs are tiny baby larvae, is when they can get infected with AFB. But if you install a swarm onto foundation, so they can't regurgitate that infected honey into the cells, they have to actually digest it. by the time that the foundation has been drawn and queen can lay eggs, and those eggs are old enough to be infected by that honey, there won't be any more honey yet, because it will still be in people, it will have been digested. Are we following me? Basically, that's the long way of saying, always install swarms onto foundation. I know it feels like you're helping them by putting them on drawn comb, but you're actually putting your apiary at risk. And if you really want to help your swarm, just feed your swarm sugar water so they can produce the wax faster. So, and it's a great way of getting comb drawn, getting new foundation drawn. So, and in 1986, nearly 20% of all colonies in Maine had American foul brood. And so all old equipment that is that old, I still hear all the time people talking about, my grandfather had bees, and so my uncle says I can have his equipment, that kind of stuff. All old equipment that hasn't had bees on it and hasn't been inspected should be destroyed. We just don't, it's a big risk. All right, so Tom Seeley and his fantastic videos of how the swarms make decisions. You can learn tons of things from his work, but one of the things that's really important that he's done is essentially identifying how to build a swarm trap and what is most attractive to bees. And the short version of the story is it should be approximately the volume of a single deep hive body. The entrance should be approximately 4 inches or less. They like to be 8 feet off the ground or higher, and swarm lures and attractants can improve the speed at which the bees will discover a swarm trap. One other thing that I should put on here is 2 equally good swarm traps within the same hive decision actually slow the decision down, because there are 2 groups of people equally attracted to them. So don't put out a bunch of them, which is what I used to do. I used to put out, like, put one on the porch, I put one in the tree, I put one here, I put one there, and it actually can slow down the chances of discovery. So you want to just pick a good spot and put one in there. So Bait Hive for Honeybees is the publication that you can download for free. It looks like that. You can find that PDF, you'll recognize it. But here are just random pictures of bees moving into swarm traps in my home yard and other apiaries. We used to do this as a workshop with the Cumberland County Beekeepers group. We bought the plant pots and cut the T111 and made swarm traps for fun. Some commercial swarm lures or homemade ones are great, but you don't ever want to put a frame of honey inside or a frame of brood inside, or pollen or anything. Really, it's just commercial swarm lures, the only thing you want to do to make it most attractive. The understanding the ways that honeybees communicate distance is important, because when something is less than 100 meters from where the bees are, they have only one way of saying it, like it's right around here, as opposed to when you're over 100 meters, the bees can actually point exactly to where the location is to within 1 meter. So if you can get your swarm traps more than 100 meters from your apiary, the probability of the bees being able to communicate the location of the swarm trap to the bivouacking swarm is easier, which is another way of saying it's helpful to be friends with a neighbor who might let you put a swarm trap in their yard, because lots of people don't have that possibility. So they communicate the idea of the swarm, and then basically you go get the swarm trap at night and then move it to your permanent location, not right where it was, because again, the bees know where that is and will return to where they thought they went. So here's another picture of bees moving into a dog food box in my yard. This is one of the first swarms that I ever captured. This is bees moving into the plant pot. You can see there's a lot, it's hard to see, but there's a lot of action happening there. There's a bunch of bees. And then I zoom out on this picture and I got, oh, there they are, yeah. Sorry. I keep screwing my fingers here. Here they are moving into that same plant pot, and then I was bringing the plant pot down and installing them into a colony. And all this is happening right next to two Newfoundlands and a German Shepherd, and acting like nothing is happening at all, which is one of my ways of saying that swarms are really exciting and dynamic when you're right exactly where they are. But frankly, if you're dealing with a swarm on the front of the house, the people at the back of the house have no idea. It's like nothing happening. It's quite shocking. Maine State Beekeepers Association has the swarm hotline, where I have to say in the last several years, it's almost exclusively cut out. We get very few actual random swarm calls anymore. I think a lot of actual beekeepers are reaching to their mentors and reaching to their bee suppliers first, instead of just randomly calling numbers on the internet. They're actually calling Phil or Chris or whoever. But it used to be much more frequent, and we do still maintain this hotline, which basically if somebody calls this hotline, Google sends a translated message to about 40 people's emails around the state. And so if somebody says, if Breakwater School calls and says, I've got a swarm of bees, it will end up in my inbox, Jack's inbox, Phil's inbox, and one of us will say, I can run up there and deal with it, or Keith or somebody. And so it's a great hotline. And you don't want to become the boy who cries wolf and be calling the swarm hotline every time you see a drone in your colony. But if you get into a situation where you actually really need help from beekeepers and you don't know what to do, this will send an email to 40 beekeepers. Like if you just said, I'm driving down the road on 202 in Gorham and with 5 beehives and 2 of them just fell out of my truck and I'm here only with myself. Chances are we would have somebody who would get that email and at minimum start making calls for you. So it's a good resource, but we don't want people to abuse it. So takeaways, really make sure you have extra equipment for every 2 or 3 colonies you manage, so you can catch swarms or so you can do that artificial swarm. Make sure you have enough extra frames and foundation for that hive ready. Early to mid-May is really when the beginning of swarm season is, and building a swarm trap is a great winter project. It's something you can do at this time of year. You can read Bee Hives for Honeybees, you can look at different sets of plants online. But that, those are great things to do for swarming. And that's all I have to say about that.
I don't believe that.
If you want to hear what else I have to say about that, feel free to sign up for school in Cumberland County Cooperative Extension. But if you're on the fence and you're kind of like, I could do that, but I'm also don't really need to, then please don't, because I would love to not teach bee school unless there's really enough demand. I'm gonna stop sharing here. And happy to answer any questions anybody has.
You still running with your Scandinavian hives or what were they?
My Slovenian beehives, yes, I do still have a Slovenian bee shed, and I do not have any colonies in the shed at this time, but I do have a colony in the yard in that style of frame. I was building a colony into those frames and I just never got them moved because I didn't have time to move them out of the yard and then back into the colony, into the shed. So the goal is to put them in the shed in early spring before they really start flying. So like when everybody's unpacking their nukes, I'm gonna be moving colonies into the shed. I can turn the lights on. Yes, it's fun. The Slovenian bee shed is fun, but it's a pain in the neck.
I'm back on. Keep going,
Yeah.
all the way to the end.
Does anybody
Down.
on the Zoom have questions?
Far end, yeah,
That's already it.
there we go.
I don't
Wake
see
everybody
anybody
up.
unmuting themselves.
So how do you, how would you rate your Slovenian hives against the regular flying strip hives?
So the question is, how would I rate the Slovenian hives against the Langstroth hives? I absolutely, I think the Slovenian hive is cute, but it is much more difficult to manipulate. And the biggest problem that I have, do any of you people know what I'm talking about? So this is a hive style. Slovenia is a country that has a very long beekeeping tradition, but their beekeeping has a tendency to be put into, they put their hives either in trailers or in sheds, and so the actual hives are much more like a closet than a stack of boxes. It's like a little cabinet, and you open the door in the little cabinet, and the frames are in here, right? I'm gonna attempt to demonstrate. So imagine you got the door open and you're in a shed. First of all, I had to install a window in the shed. It's too dark to see anything. But then I installed a window, and now I open this thing, and so we'll cut the top off, and we're just gonna measure. We have 2 sets of frames, which of course are not the same size as the frames that we have. So you have to manipulate your boxes in order to build a nuke, but whatever. So, and they rest, so it's this nice, really well constructed cabinet, and it has 3 metal bars that go across, like one in the front, one in the middle, and one in the back. And then also the second, and that's how the frames are separated from each other, top to bottom. And the frames are kind of concave. So instead of just being flat on the bottom, they're concave. So when you pull them across the little metal bars, in theory, the bees wouldn't get squished because part of it is concave. But also, in the front and back, there are things that are like those hive spacers. You know what I'm talking about? The hive spacer. So there are things like that in the front and back that you have to fit the frame. So you slide the frame in. So when it's empty, no problem. You slide one frame in, shooting for the middle thing on this side, and you're gonna line it up with the door that shuts here, right? But once you got all 10 in, you can imagine there's a fair amount of like dinking around trying to get these frame grabbers lined up exactly perfectly, right? Which you then eventually do when you shut it, and that's fine. But when you're manipulating the frame, so you come back, that was, whatever. Now it's covered in bees and honey, and you take this door off, so these grabbers are now out. But you kind of have to like pull everybody a little bit to the side, like squish everybody a little bit to get to the first one to take it out. You see what I'm saying? And then the next one also, same thing. So the frames don't have ears, like our frames have ear spacers from the top so that you don't actually squish the faces against each other. They don't have those. And we're pulling this way instead of pulling up. So I find it really fucking pain in the ass. And it makes even me not really want to do really thorough inspections. And so I basically have given up on real swarm prevention or management in these colonies. Again, I go in, I find the queen. If it's swarming season-ish, I just dequeen every one of these hives and make them requeen themselves. Because when you pull the frames out, like I said, they have those convex things. So theoretically, you're not breaking them against the bark, but every queen cell gets smushed because the queen cells are down a little bit past. It just doesn't, it's not great. So as soon as I find the laying queen, I just take her out. As opposed to, like in my other hives, when you just tip the box up, you can see the queen cells. Which frames to be careful with. It's just, it absolutely clearly makes sense from a migratory beekeeper standpoint, particularly back before the days of varroa mites when people didn't treat. Which is really up until 20 years ago. And the way that they're literally the hives that the gypsies use. And by gypsies, I mean the Roma, basically, truly were migratory beekeepers in their wagons going up to the different flows to capture the different flows. I mean, it's a fun thing. And the whole reason I got it was because I went to a bee conference once and this German beekeeper was spouting off about how he didn't even understand why Americans even kept bees because they don't have bees in sheds for napping. And I was like, wait a minute. Who just said bees in sheds for napping? Like, sign me up for that, which is really a thing. And actually, I literally actually went to Santiago, Chile for the first time in my life this September to the APAMONDI, a beekeeping conference, and a huge number of European researchers are working on actually decoding the literal and scientific benefits of what they call the beehive air, which is like what is the benefit of napping in a bee house where you are breathing in propolis air and all this kind, which is actually true. And now we can analyze those volatile chemicals and actually explain it, whereas forever beekeepers have just been saying it's very restorative, you know. But anyway, so I built it so I could do the naps, but it is not great for men. That's the long version. But I mean, if you have some extra money and really wanted to do it, I have very seriously thought, maybe I will just modify my shed so that I actually have Langstroth hives in here. Because all you have to do, so I now have this cabinet, 4 cabinets with different frames and the whole shebang, but you could literally just build a shed where you slid your beehive in so that it's at the wall and the hive is inside. And you can manipulate, I mean, you can manipulate it from the inside and then just mush it right back up. You know, you can just slide it back an inch and do your inspection just as if you were outside, because you would have just opened up that front wall space, and the bees always go forward anyway, you know what I mean? So it's not, if you end up with them flying around in the shed, which of course you do on this one a little bit as well, you have the door open and they just, or the window over, or both, and they just fly out. They're attracted to the light and they go out. So you could definitely do it without Slovenian hives. You can do a shed.
I think
The advantage of the Slovenian hive is those grippy teeth and the frames being manipulated so that, you know, when they're on a wagon or a truck, they don't rock. I mean, you could tip those hives and the frames are like, they're held in on the inside of the hive. Whereas ours wouldn't work that way, but we're not doing that. We're having it in the stationary shed anyway.
You wanna take a nap?
Exactly.
I think Buzz Cooper just.
So is there no,
For
oh,
his
sorry.
hive.
Is there no real difference in the overwintering with those types of hives that would make it almost worth it?
No, there is no real difference. In fact, there is a negative real difference. So the negative real difference is, let's say you have a good strong colony in the shed. The problem with good strong colonies is they have a higher probability of starvation in a crappy spring, right? Because they get all happy getting ready to grow, and then the weather gets volatile. Hello, everything that's happening, and they basically build their colony size up so much that they start consuming too much food, that if the new food doesn't come in time, they come at risk of starvation. And the solution to that, when you're me, with an infinite amount of equipment, is that I will take a frame or a box, a super or a deep of honey from another dead colony, and I'll just pick a nice warm day. I mean, I would have done it today if I had colonies that I was worried about. I'd run out and just throw a box of honey right on top, and that move takes 11 seconds, right? In the Slovenian house, our starving bees would be up towards the top of the cabinet, and I gotta wait until I can get in, get the whole cabinet disassembled, get frames of honey, and there's no way to just slam a box on top. And that's a real disadvantage. Same thing with, there's no way to just reverse, and there's no way to just do that, slam a box into the middle. Apparently slamming boxes is a big management technique that I use, but it really kind of is at this stage. I mean, I'm in and out of my beehives in 5 minutes often, like just check, 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 ding dong, do it. And there's no check, 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 ding dong, do it. It's like this whole, and I've got 4 in one shed. And so it is there, it severely limits your management. Because you can't just add up and down. Every single frame has to be individually taken out and individually painstakingly put back, which is much easier to do when there are no bees in it. So when you like get it the first time, you're like, this is not that inconvenient. This looks really fun. You know, wait till it's covered in bees. You know, that being said, I still do it because I'm gadgety and it's fun, but it's not a big priority for me to have all 4 of them populated all the time. And I definitely wouldn't recommend it to anybody who is not literally just fooling around with things for the fun of it. And if you really want to just fiddle around with things for the fun of it, I would sooner go with my Waré hives, which I do find fun and are sort of a pain in the neck, but not that much of a pain in the neck. And or also mating nukes, which is really a great, like if you just want to get gadgety and try doing something different, get yourself a couple mating nukes and have fun with that, because then you end up really learning something which is not the many levels at which this is actually more of a pain in the neck than I thought it was gonna be, which is really where this has gone.
Well,
Yeah,
Thanks.
sure. Yeah,
So if my bee hive does actually make it through the winter, I have just a single bee.
yep.
And I know swarming is a big problem when you just winter in a single bee, because they build up so fast in the spring. What should my timeline look like for getting? I mean,
So you
this is
have
my
nothing
first
but
year.
foundation?
Think so, yeah.
Okay,
I'm trying to think like, I think it's all foundation for my supers.
and are you planning on wintering in a single deep and then just supering, so you're gonna do that technique? Okay, so what the number one best thing that you could do is purchase drawn comb supers.
Okay.
If you can. If you can't, get your supers on as early as you can, and if the flow isn't good, if the weather is intermittent and they are not just drawing comb like mad, maybe even feed them a little bit to get them so they can draw that space, so they have, because what's gonna happen in your single deep is the whole goal is that all the honey goes above and all the brood goes below. But if they have nowhere to store honey, there is nothing about foundation that is storage space for honey. So really the key is having drawn comb. If you can buy some, that would be ideal. And then I'd also say try to buy a few frames of deep drawn comb if you can, or cycle in a frame or 2 of foundation so that you can cycle out a frame or 2 of deep drawn comb. So you could do an artificial swarm if you need to, but that's the whole trick with having the equipment. It's hard when you start out, but it'll come. It'll be fun. Yeah.
They just need to make it through the winter.
Pardon me?
They just need to make it through the winter.
Yes, and so far so good. I mean, I went down, I have 38 colonies in my home yard and 3 are dead, which is pretty good. And I also used a experimental mite treatment this year, which I bought at Apimondia, which was very effective, which is a commercially produced in the rest of the world oxalic acid impregnated strip. Called Alucap. And I think it may get approved in the United States, but I liked it a lot, and you can buy it in the Caribbean. So there's an excuse that, like, if nothing else, we need a trip to somewhere in that this is sold, which is all South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. But it was very effective, and it was a single application. It's basically the thing that Randy Oliver has been trying to replicate with homemade things, but it's actually commercially produced in
Chile.
New Zealand.
where was,
New
is
Zealand.
it New Zealand that is produced? Yeah,
And
yeah.
we're waiting for it to be approved in Maine.
yeah.
Oh, good. Actually in Maine and not in the United States?
Well, apparently it's state by state.
Hmm,
I guess, as well.
I'll call Jennifer and tell her I used it. I don't think I've told her that yet. I'm really happy with the results. I mean, so far, but you don't have big, strong colonies that look the way that mine do on their FLIR if they were having varroa issues in the fall, and this is the only treatment I used in my yard. So, yeah. Do we have other questions? Anybody on the internet? Sorry.
No, nothing, nope.
Well, thank you guys for your time. It's nice to have the days getting a little longer. Yeah, it's gonna come. The spring's gonna come. The pussy willows are thinking about it. And, yeah, get your equipment ready. Get the mice out of your storage spaces.
Bastards.
I know, really? I'm so sick of mice.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hire a fleet of cats. Yeah, well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know, it's very good.
Lindy, we're gonna do a quick business.
I don't know.
Can I make a quick plea to your quick business?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
No, I think that was there. Yeah, do you mind? Are the Zoom people still on Zoom?
I think, yeah.
Can I make a quick appeal to your business, please? All right, so I'm gonna get you guys' attention for one more minute to talk about something else really briefly, other than the
Oh, yeah, there's.
So I think you guys know that in my straight job, I'm an accountant, and I think a lot about accounting and beekeeping and lots of different things. And one of the things that I'm aware of through EAS and our local clubs is that particularly our local clubs, beekeeping clubs, many beekeeping clubs like ours have thousands of dollars that they've raised for a variety of ideas and reasons that they don't actually spend.
Right.
And that's not useful. Like, it's useful to spend those monies either on research, give them to EAS, or we'll give research grants, those kinds of things. But a new development happening at EAS, I don't know if you guys ever seen, and I'm blanking on his name. I think it's Matt Wiley. There's an artist who has a project that he's doing murals around the country called, what is it?
I don't know the
It's
name of
something
it.
the Hive. Of course, it's something the Hive. We have one in Bangor. If you Google mural artist bees, there's one of them at the National Zoo in Washington DC. Anyway, Cornell is rebuilding the Dice Lab, and they are trying to fundraise to have him paint a wall. It costs something in the vicinity of I think it's $47,000 they're trying to raise. But I think we have, I don't know what, 15 grand in our bank account or something that we don't know anything to do with. And so if Cumberland County Beekeepers Association would like to help support raising money to put a beautiful bee mural, they're all anatomically correct in this the guy's plan is to try to paint 60,000 individual bees around the country in these murals, and each one has, 250 bees or something, and so it's very interesting. So Google it, and if you think that it's something worth supporting, like there's no reason for us to have thousands and thousands of dollars beyond what we need. It's great to raise money, but we need to also do something with it, and that would be my suggestion of something great to do. And so when I talked to Lou the other night, she said, how are we gonna raise the money? I said, we should make the EAS directors go out to the bee clubs and ask them if they've got extra money. So if Cumberland County Beekeepers Association feels like they've got extra money, please consider that. And if other local clubs do, feel free to tell them that I'll come to their meeting or Zoom into their meeting and try to make the same pitch. Because I think it's good to have cool bee art at your Cornell Dice Lab. So that's my pitch for your business teacher. But overlandhoney.com. That's the internet. Yes, right on. Yes, Overland Honey.
Overland.
Yes, that's my website, overlandhoney.com.
Were you doing that?
Yes.
We're gonna do a little bit of business.
Yes.
We're not done yet.
I think the
I locked all the doors.
this is
You can't get out.
Oh, right, yeah, I just had it.
Oh, just me.
Thank you so much.
All right, are we still zooming?
Yes, we are. There's a few people. Yep, Andy, Megan.
So we're gonna do a quick business meeting.
Yes, yeah.
And there was-
went up in the backhoe?
Yes.
Well, I was,
That takes
that boy is 21
Oh
now.
my gosh.
That little boy that's.
I know, that's where we used to do it, but they wanna get the
So I was
speaker on.
looking at it, I said.
Keep everybody's interest. I say leave the speaker to the end. That way you
Oh,
keep
yeah.
it.
Who would have thunk it?
Who'd have thunk it?
I get overruled. But anyways, so we'll call the business meeting to order. There really wasn't any minutes from last month because it wasn't a quorum, so I'm not gonna ask anybody if they approved the minutes. But can we get a treasury report from, Megan? Can she hear us?
Yep, I'm here on Zoom. Treasurer's report, we ended the month with $11,780.43. We collected $190 in dues, and then expenses were $15.42 in PayPal fees and $100 for the Cersei Society donation. And that was it.
Thank you. A membership report,
262,
Thank you.
263.
253. Thank you, Janet. All right, how about our mentor coordinator, Mr. Andy?
I have not yet started recruiting new mentors, but I have drafted the email this evening. We'll send it out later on this evening. Anyone interested in becoming a mentor or mentoring others, you'll get an email from me tonight, and I hope you'll reply.
Okay, put me down, Andy.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris.
Welcome. We didn't really have any old business. Does anybody think of anything? Last meeting, we didn't have quorum. The meeting before that was the Christmas one, and the meeting before that was our holiday meeting, so really not much old business to go over. Which is not true. There is one thing on the old business I will mention because there's a few other new people here. I am still talking to, our wine club in New Hampshire about honey and how much they need. And if the club is interested in getting in on that, cause I brought it up last time and there was a few people that were like, yeah, no, not really. But, new faces, new ideas, so I'm gonna throw it back out there. This wine club, when they make their different wines, one of them is they use like a couple thousand pounds of honey for some of the wine that they make. And they buy it like down in Pennsylvania or whatever. And what I'm trying to do is kind of try to do a little bit of the local business because when they make their ciders, they buy their apples from an orchard here in Maine. So my idea was to say, hey, you're getting your apples here in Maine, why don't we try to, get some honey from me, if it's possible. Like I said, there's new faces, so I figured I'd bring that idea back up. That was on the old business. So if anybody has any comments they want to do that, they can do it in the open, or you can contact me and we can go from there. All right, new business. We'll bring up what Aaron mentioned. How does everybody feel about maybe donating some money towards, the gentleman that's doing the murals and stuff like that, or something similar to that? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Great idea.
I think it's great, yeah. Second that motion.
All right. All right, so we'll get a
Kind
hold
of find out what amounts they're looking for, I guess.
right.
go from there.
So,
Well, Chris, this is Andy on Zoom. I just wonder how it ties in with our charter. Do we have a charter? Is there some express purpose? The people who have been giving money, are they expecting us to be supporting art?
I don't know if they're expecting it, but it's something, if we wanna do that, why not? I mean, if we have some money and we don't mind donating a little bit of it, of course, the club has to approve that, why not? You know?
I don't think we have I don't know if we have a charter,
Okay,
like, down, if that answers you. We'd have to ask Keith.
Yeah,
I don't
keep
think
it-
it
keep it-
Yeah.
way back when I started.
You know, okay. I'm like,
If you had it, you
I
had
think
it
it's
after
pretty
I left.
loosey-goosey.
okay, okay, good.
Have to have a charter?
I'm fine. If there's no charter, I just want to make sure that we were if we had a charter, we were making our decisions in that context, but that's fine. If it's a free for all and people are up for it, that works for me.
Isn't most of the money in the checking account from dues, or do you actually have funds that people are donating? I'd like to donate an extra $100.
I think most of it comes from dues, but I know there are some donations that get put into
And
it.
it just says donation for general fund, it doesn't say donation for specific classes or specific items.
I would kind of like to kind of denote, this is kind of a separate topic, but I raised a little bit of money through selling queens and nukes and kind of keeping that maybe separate from the other general slush fund,
Just the general.
just so we can kind of put it back into the club hives and
Right, oh, absolutely, yeah.
whatever, do,
I don't have a problem with that.
queen
But that,
stuff.
again, that's where it comes through, the club, so. everybody-
Yeah. Set that aside as like, just like club hive, like reserved funds.
Right,
Just have your treasurer break that out. It's a separate line item. as
yeah,
income.
did you get that?
Yeah, yeah, I'll get that in like a separate line.
I mean, it's not much, it's only, but it was something.
All right, so,
That we investigate how much they're looking for, for donations, the average, and then verify that this doesn't affect any charter or anything, and then that we bring it to the next meeting and make a vote to do it, if it's good.
Yeah,
we got a motion, we got a second,
yeah,
Had a second right here.
yeah,
Okay.
I think we're good to
all
go.
in favor,
Yeah,
opposed? Okay, so we'll, talk with Keith and contact Aaron again.
Yep.
And.
yeah, she gave me, it's on the EAS
Okay,
website.
so we'll get a little bit more information, then we'll bring that back to the next meeting. Any other new business? Any ideas? New members? Whereabouts?
Take their money and run.
Maybe, wait a minute, no.
Roger?
Wholehearted yes, right?
None yet?
Do you have
We're gonna
three
start
sister
out-
Not yet, okay.
Oh, perfect.
We need to take.
We do have another, he's not really a new beekeeper, he's new to the club, he's actually made it to the meetings. Andrew,
Let's see you.
he's comes from a long family history of bees. So he might have some brain cells you can pick if he allows it. So, good to meet you. You're gonna be tested at the next meeting.
There's a bee bingo.
That's right, the bee bingo, that was a great game.
Yeah, I'm gonna work on that.
That was a good
I just
game.
haven't had time, but
And
Yeah.
yeah, you got any questions?
That's my
feel
$1 million
free to Reach out to the
Retirement.
club for questions and stuff like that. And get on the mentor list with John. So there's, and you guys are over in the Yarmouth area, so I'm,
Yeah.
So that's Andy's.
what did I say?
John.
I'm sorry. Well, I know a John Myers and we got an Andy Myers, so I get them confused sometimes. They look almost alike. Anyways. Andy, contact Andy and he will put you in touch with a mentor that's in your area, and I'm sure that over in that area, there are plenty of beekeepers in that area. Great. Right, and Andy's a good man to get you set up with somebody. All right, any other new business?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second?
Yeah.
Or
Follow up with email. Do you mind?
So, yeah, definitely reach out.
One of those things.
Not yet.
Yeah. Did you get any?
Oh, that's why you can't help it. I can try to figure out what it is. I know I think I had the option to pay this.
Yeah, that's a budget was like. I mean, I'm pretty much just. And then I.
Okay, thank you.
I was gonna ask if I could look Yes, okay, yeah, I did that, yes, right, yep.
Get ready to check out.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of wondering about. Okay. Install the package, yeah. That was week, that is week 3. So we one is like biology. Okay, I really appreciate that.
Because there's a lot of, like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of ways you don't have to spend money because I know. You know, that's a. That way, you know, I think you could start doing beekeeping just to, that way. And just go catch us for it. And then start rolling that way. I think that's kind of a neat way to go.
Yeah, I have all those too, so, yeah, all mine is pretty much 10, so whatever. And I have in frame.
Catch a swarm, it sounds like there might be extra swarms on there.
You might catch one over time.
Yeah.
My theory is.
If I wanted to make copies of it, I've seen them, but to add to your.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you were saying you were.
I would say email it to me.
From Florida.
Okay. Okay.
They didn't make anything for us this week, this year. They didn't even make the certificates.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right, I'll get that organized then. Okay.
I mean, if you email it to me, I'll just print them off.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Sounds good.